Mortimer, we're going to be talking about how to read a book, and I brought you some books to read.
What do you mean by reading? Reading is a highly ambiguous word. It can mean any number of things.
Yeah.
Do you mean reading for information, reading for just amusement and relaxation, or reading for understanding? Reading by which I'm going to lift my mind up from understanding less to understanding more. Which?
Well, all three. I mean, the books that I brought you, I think, are susceptible of reading in all those three different ways, and
I think I can tell, by the way, by looking at them, which way I want to read them, if I'm going to read them at all. And I brought you some books. You take these and look at these while I look at yours.
All right.
This is a book I've wanted to read for a long time, but read very lightly. It's a book by Merrill Miller, which is the oral biography of Harry S. Truman. I've read reviews of it, and I know what it contains. It's the story of Truman's political life and his presidency, told in the first person by his recording it. I know I want to read that book quickly. It wouldn't take me much time to read it.
This is Toynbee on Toynbee, and there's a long description of the book right on the cover. A conversation between Arnold J. Toynbee and G.R. Urban on topics of perennial and current interest. And since Toynbee is one of the great authors of our century, I am sure that I would want to read that, but not...
Well, I know I don't want to read this. I know that I don't even want to glance at it more than the cover. It's a Rand McNally book all about bicycling. Charles, I'm sorry to tell you, I've never been able to keep my balance on a bicycle. That's
well,
that.
Maybe that would help you to do it.
No, I assure you, no book. This is a how-to book. And no book would ever be able to, I'd never be able to go from a book to staying up on a bicycle.
Well, what if we ran out of gas completely?
I'd walk.
Right. Oh, you did do well by me, didn't you? Now, here's a book by I.A. Richards, the philosopher. It's called Beyond, the sources and names of the Western tradition from the Iliad and Job to Plato, Dante, and Shelley. And I think I'd probably want to read that book. It is a complex book with a analytical table of contents, Mortimer, which is something that books used to have.
That's right.
With a quite distinct and well-described analysis of what's in the book. I will read I.A. Richards.
Charles, I've got the last three books you laid out for me, but why did you give me Hamlet? You know I've read that.
Yeah, well, I know you've read it, but
That's a book I'd read carefully. I've read it 10, 15 times already.
There are notes in it.
Oh.
And every page is printed on every other page, and every other page, therefore, contains notes and commentary and so forth.
Well,
and I thought that might be interesting and useful.
Well, Hamlet, against all the books you give me, this is the only one that I would read. I have read 10, 15 times, perhaps, in the course of years of reading, slowly, carefully, understanding a little more each time I've read it. This is the only book you've given me that I would put in the class of reading for the sake of my mind. The rest, I mean, the sense of improving my mind, understanding my own life and human life better than I would have without reading it. These other books, the Truman book would amuse me, entertain me, and inform me. The other books are strictly books of information. They're not going to teach me anything beyond facts that I don't know. And that seems to me is that distinction between books that one reads for information, or magazines or newspapers, books that one reads for amusement, such as detective stories or light novels or current fiction of some kind or other, and books that one reads to improve one's understanding is very important for the following reason. All of us learn to read in school, and that instruction in reading goes on to the 4th or 6th grade. Now, for most of these books, the kind of reading you learn to do up to the 4th or 6th grade is quite sufficient. You've got enough skill to read the newspaper.
Although you have to practice it. You have to keep on using it.
But to read Hamlet, or to read other books that are worth reading for the sake of improving your mind, you need skills that are not taught in school. In fact, the kind of reading that I think we should be talking about from now on in this is reading that is not taught in school at all. Reading that involves acts of interpretation, acts of analysis, acts of apprehension of content in the book.
And acts of critical judgment after you've finished.
Now, that kind of reading cannot be done quickly.
No, I don't think it can either. How fast would you read Hamlet, Mortimer, if you were reading it...
For the first time?
Well, for the first time, yeah.
I'd read it more quickly the first time than the second and third time. But let me say about the speed of reading that there's no such thing as a right speed. When I'm reading Plato, for example, or Aristotle, I seldom read faster than 20 pages an hour, sometimes slower than that.
Well, that's pretty slow, isn't it?
In fact, I would guess, Charles, that reading in the sense, that third sense of reading for the sake of really lifting my mind up from a state of understanding less to understanding more, I doubt if I read 10 books a year. I handle hundreds. I examine many. I get information from a great many. I get pleasure from the books I read at night to go to sleep with. But I assure you, the books that I learn from, in a genuine sense of deepening my mind, gaining insight and some degree of wisdom, I hope, I doubt if I read 10 a year. Because I read them very slowly. It's hard work. I read them at a desk, usually at a desk with pencil and paper, marking the book. And therefore, it seems to me that the whole cult of speed reading is wrong.
Yes, I think you're right.
Instead of talking about speed reading, one should talk about variable speed reading. Everyone should be able to read some things very quickly, particularly if their purposes are light and transient, and some things very, very slowly. The trouble is that most people don't know how to read slowly enough.
Yes, I think that's true when it comes to a really, really good book. Speed reading is useful for learning how to read business memos or business letters or something of the sort quickly.
I don't think I'd recommend it for contracts or leases.
No, nor for love letters.
Or for love letters.
No, love letters should be read very, very slowly. Now, in the case of Hamlet, for example, suppose you didn't know what that play was and hadn't read it before. You're saying that, first of all, you'd like to find out some things about it from kind of exterior cues, like its title and its author's name and when it was written and its cast of characters.
This copy of Hamlet you gave me, I wouldn't want. On my first reading of Hamlet, I don't want to be stopped by the notes. Right. I don't want footnotes. I want to read it through quickly. In fact, my feeling about a difficult book, a book that's worth reading carefully, is that the first time you read it, you should read very quickly. That's just the first time, expecting to read it again much more slowly. And quickly in the sense of not being stopped. There are lots of allusions in Hamlet that I wouldn't understand the first time, which the notes would help me understand better.
Right.
But on that first reading, I don't want to understand everything. I want to understand enough to get the whole play in before me.
Because it's so terribly important to understand the whole structure of a book before you start to read it in detail and understand it in detail, isn't it?
When I went to high school many, many years ago, we read Julius Caesar, as I think the first year of high school. We read it scene by scene, understanding each scene. As a result, I never understood the play as a whole.
Yes.
Well, what they should have done instead of reading it scene by scene first is to read the play through completely and discuss it as a whole, and then go back, perhaps, and read it more carefully, scene by scene, with notes and explanations.
I had the same experience with As You Like It, and as a matter of fact, because my father was a poet and a professor of English and a teacher of Shakespeare, he said, read As You Like It all the way through the night before, and I did it. And I came to school the next day, and the teacher was annoyed with me because I had spoiled her plan. And yet I had done something very important for myself because I was able to understand what she was doing henceforth.
I'm so convinced about this that when I've been reading great books with students or with adults in great book seminars, I always tell them, when I give them a difficult text for discussion to read it through and not be stopped by what they don't understand on the first reading. Because only by reading it through and understanding, let's say 10% or 20% or 30%, will they be able to go back and understand more. One example I'm very fond of is a great treatise in the Summa Theologica by Thomas Aquinas, one of the treatises that I think is most instructive, illuminating, the treatise on law. And I've had people that I've asked to read this get stopped because when they get, it's really questions 90 to 97 or 98, about 8 or 9 questions, and on the second of those questions, 92, Article 6 is the question whether there is a law in the foams of sin, F-O-M-E-S. The foams of sin.
What are foams?
And people stop reading. They say, well, I don't know what foams are. I can't find it in the dictionary, a small dictionary. And so they stop reading because they can't understand that particular passage. And I've said to them, first place, if you don't understand that one passage, it will not affect your general grasp of the treatise on law. In the second place, if you look at the context, you'll get some sense of the foams of sin, the passions. You'll see the discussion here of the passions as the sources of the animal passions, as the sources of original sin, the causes of Adam's fall. And after you've read the treatise on law through, you'll be able to go back and understand better why St. Thomas asks whether there's a law in the foams of sin. But people who get stopped by that, or for example...
What is foams? Now, what does the word mean?
Foams are substances that communicate infection, infectious substances.
I see.
And the passions infect us with sin, you see.
Right. But you can understand that in a general way as well as you have to understand it from the context.
But if you didn't, it wouldn't make any difference because it's only one question, and if you, to stop there is to defeat yourself entirely. Go on reading, you see.
Another example of that is the first canto of the Divine Comedy of Dante. Many people get hung up on that first canto because as Dante is traveling through the world, he comes to himself in the middle of a dark wood in the middle of the journey of his life, and he meets a leopard and a she-wolf and a lion. And these are highly allegorical figures, and Dante doesn't really explain what they mean. And I have known readers who said, I can't go on because I don't know what those animals mean. It does not matter. As a matter of fact, Dante really never explains what they mean. But if you go on just a little bit more, Dante meets Virgil, and Virgil is the most important character after Dante and Beatrice in the book, and then the story unfolds. But don't get stuck at the beginning.
Now, you know, if you follow me in this distinction between reading for amusement or entertainment, relaxation, and reading just for information, on the one hand, and reading for understanding, for deepening your mind, acquiring insight, lifting your mind up from a lower level to a higher level, then I think it's terribly important for each of us, for everyone, to find a number of books that are over their heads. Because if a person reads only books that are on the level of his head, he can't lift his head up. It's the books that are over one's head, the books which one only partially understands at first and must work at to understand more that can possibly elevate you. You can't lift yourself up with things at your level or below your level.
You can't chin yourself on a bar that's below your
but most people say, that's over my head, as if that immediately dismisses it. On the contrary, what's over your head you should go after.
Right. If you pick up a book and you find it's too tough for you, you shouldn't throw it aside. I mean, that's what you're looking for. You should be happy when you find a book that's too hard for you, because that's a book that you can grow with. That's a book that you can lift yourself up with.
And the art of reading consists in knowing how to do just that.
Right.
The art of reading, I'd like to say, consists in having the skills required for lifting your mind up with a book, and nothing but a book in your hand, from understanding less to understanding more.